My name is Rabbi Lazer Rivkin, regional director of Chabad, the Chabads of Central Florida, and the Young Israels. We have two Young Israels. Well, we're in the middle days of the month of Elul, the month when the world was created on the 25th day of the month of Elul, that first week of creation. It is when the king sort of goes out into the field to look at his creation and see how well they're doing. So it checks up on them. So it's known also as the Chodesh HaRachamim, the month of mercy. So even though the world was created to be whole and complete at the time of the creation in the Garden of Eden, and then there was an imperfection that occurred with the sin of Adam and Eve. The reality is that throughout the journey of humanity, till the time of the final redemption, when Mashiach will come, the Messianic age will come, it is the duty of all humanity, and of the Jewish people in particular, to bring peace and harmony into the world. Why of the Jewish people in particular? Because they were chosen by God as descendants of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel and Leah, to be the head, so to say, to humanity, to guide them, to help be a treasure unto them, to discover and make and create benefits for all of humanity, for themselves, their families, Israel, and all of humanity. So even though the ideal of the Torah is peace, and it is prominent in the Torah, God designed and created the world in such a way that it leaves mankind subject to an almost constant inner struggle and strife. In other words, having to choose, having to wage a relentless battle with the physical inclination that we have, which can lead us to evil things that we do. Because if we are focused on our physical selves and the corporal physical world only, because that's all we see, then we end up being more animalistic. In fact, the Zohar, the esoteric teachings of Judaism, points out that the Hebrew word for bread is lechem. Lechem is the Hebrew word for bread. It's derived from the same root word that denotes war. Lochem is to do battle. And this symbolizes the concept of the continued struggle between the base and sublime natures of a corporal human being in a corporal world. We all know that there are three things that bring to war: food, survival, basically, pleasures for oneself, and even water that can bring to war, because these are things that are required to sustain ourselves. And so therefore, if we lack those things, it has in many instances brought to all kinds of upheavals and concepts of war. So there is this whole concept and struggle between the base and sublime nature of a human being, whether he eats his bread as a glutton, in the manner an animal eats its food, which is a continuous, you could say, chewing of the cud, that the cow continually is chewing, its head sort of down into the ground, and therefore it is just an animal. Whereas there is that element of eating with a higher purpose and level and goal to keep the body healthy, in order to be able to do what is good and right in accordance with the will of the Creator. The Creator created, you have to agree to that, there's no question. There was a Creator that created the universe and the human being and everything about it, because these things don't happen by chance. If you were to take 1 through 14 index cards, number them, and then shuffle them, the odds of them coming out in sequential order is 1 in 40 million. That's on 14 numbers. Now for the human being, the DNA and the genome to all work together in sequential orders in order to be a healthy human being and a seeing eye, there's an infinite amount of time that would be needed for that to happen by chance. If you're a scientific person, you have to say there was a Creator. The rocket ship doesn't fly out of an oven or a furnace. If I grant you the furnace, there has to be a Creator. There has to be a pile of material somewhere that can be put into the furnace and out it will fly. And if you believe that, then I'll sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. So there has to be a Creator. And therefore the Creator had a purpose. And He has a will for us to fulfill. What is that will? Mentioned many times previously, and we should always keep that in mind. The Creator doesn't need anything. The Creator has everything, for He's omnipotent. He's neither He, He's not she, He's everything. And therefore, He was manifesting His concept of sovereignty, of being a king. In order to be a king, you have to have subjects. You have to have a king over what? Over the table? Over the dust? Well, what are you king of? You're a king of citizens or subjects who have accepted you as king and show their allegiance to you by virtue of fulfilling the commands of the king. The month of Elul is when the king is out in the field. He's looking over his subjects, his creation. And on Rosh Hashanah, he has to decide if he wants to continue the operation. Is this world worth keeping and fixing? Because it does need a lot of fixing lately. Just read the headlines. And therefore, he has to make that decision. And that is why Rosh Hashanah is called the head of the year. It's not the new year. It's the new year for Adam and Eve and humanity who were created on that first Friday of the first week. And on that Friday and on that Saturday of the first week are the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. That's why we have those 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, even in the land of Israel. And therefore, our sages taught that Jewish souls actually preceded the rest of the creation. Why? Because the purpose of the creation was to manifest God's presence within the world, and God had to choose one of the nations of the world to be His ambassadors. And He chose a small nation because He doesn't need powerful armies to get His job done. And He chose the Jewish people, Am Yisrael, Atem Hamat Mikol Ha'amim, you are the smallest of all the nations. And He imbued them with special souls. Those souls help them fulfill their mission of being a light unto all the nations of the world. And thus it says that God consulted with these souls that He created before He made the creation. He asked them, listen fellas, I created you to go down into physical bodies. And there you're going to have to go ahead and struggle with your physical bodies. And you'll have to choose between a godly, spiritual path or a physical, corporal path. That's the body, corporal. The neshama, the soul, is spiritual. And the souls gave their full consent. That's what it says. In Rus Rabbah, it's brought down that medrash, that they said, okay, we will fulfill what you are requesting of us. Now, but they realized that the physical body is not exactly an easy vessel to purify and direct. So even though the soul agreed, it comes down to this world. Haneshama yaredes l'teich haguf. The soul goes down into the body. Ach tzalekes, but it's sort of crying out, whoa, whoa. I have to go into this imprisoning body with all of its cravings and desires and trying to pull me into the mud, which I really don't want to go into. But in any event, they agreed. And they are therefore the primary source of the spiritual in the physical world. Every aspect of the world was seen as conducive, ultimately, to serving Hashem, to serving God. And in particular, in the physical, corporal world, because that's where it's most at odds with the spiritual. So God wanted to create this stage where He's hidden, not visible. I don't see the energy of God on the table, but it's there. I don't see God. Where is He? It's not around. Reality is everything that exists is part of God. And God expects of us to be able to reveal the spiritual within it and harness it to serve God. Now, that's an accomplishment, because by its nature, the physical is at odds with the spiritual. The physical is a depreciating asset that ultimately dries out, diminishes, and disappears. The soul, on the other hand, the neshama, is what rises back and returns to the heavenly spheres. So at that moment, that the soul appreciated how things that we perceive now as a negative influence are a struggle against, so to say, an enemy, because they attempt to deter us from observing God's will. The body does. Are in truth an aid to divine service. When you have to struggle with something, you accomplish a much more powerful effect. Easy comes, easy go. But if you got to work for it or toil for it, it becomes something that you exerted your energy for, and it becomes attached to you. And therefore, even the creation of our enemies had the soul's full consent. In other words, the other side of the coin, that we should be able to go ahead and choose between the spiritual and the physical. We have to have both. You can't choose if there's only one side. Another thing of it is that the soul never forgets, being that it is a part of God. It never forgets its previous journeys down here, reincarnations. And therefore, even after it comes down into a body, facing the ongoing struggle between the base and the sublime, the soul retains an unbreakable inner strength and is impervious to anything that may deter it from its mission. It has all this recorded within its presence. So this is the purpose then of why God created a stage where God is hidden. And we should be able to have free choice. So when the portion that we read yesterday is Kiseitze la milchama ala yevecha, the Torah tells us what happens when you go out to do battle. Moshe is saying to wage war against your enemies. Unsana Hashem elokecha biyadecha v'shavisha shivya. You will be able to go ahead and overcome. It does say that you will do battle with your enemies. You will be alevecha, on top of your enemies. You will, in other words, wrestle him down and be the victor over him. Ever seen a wrestling match? Pin him down to the what? What do they call it? To the canvas? To the mat. To the mat. Down to the mat. And therefore, because Hashem wants you to do that, and He says it biyadecha, you have to make the effort. You have to fight it, so to say. Fight the fight. And what's going to be? And you will then go ahead, v'shavisha shivya, you will capture the physical, and you will harness it to bring it close to Hashem. That's the whole portion of Kiseitze La Milchama when you go out. But we don't have any enemies like that today. So the answer is, as explained in the esoteric teachings of Judaism, that your enemies are your own characteristic traits. The 7 attributes that every human being has, besides his intellectual 3 attributes, you are supposed to refine them, your character, to become more spiritual and holy. The nature of the emotions of a person are physical, up and down, etc. The way how to do it is by studying the Torah and then doing the mitzvot. Those are the vehicles that help to engage the physical body within its parameters as a physical body to serve God. Not to destroy it, because it, after all, is part of God, so to say, in a hidden form. The energy is there. But in order to be able to go ahead and make it serve Hashem, you have to harness it. So to put a yoke on it. The yoke, the person doesn't want to have a yoke. Want to be wild and free. But you have to domesticate the soul, the physical body, to serve Hashem. And it's tied into a description as you go in battle, as it was in ancient times and even today. And you're going to capture a woman, you're going to want the woman, you're going to bring her to your house, etc., etc. You can't just do what you want to do with her. You have responsibilities. She becomes your wife. You have to go ahead and fulfill the proper way of serving, of marrying her and serving her. Torah goes into a description of a variety of situations. The situations are, you may have more than one wife. How do you address the issues? What happens if you have children from both wives, one you love and one you don't particularly like? You have to be fair, and you have to go ahead to the older wife, her children get the portion. You can't say, well, this is my favorite, and therefore I will not give them their proper portion. Torah goes in and explains all these things, that how the moral code is to be attached within Judaism, the parameters of relations between a man and a woman, and also speaks about how we are ultimately to go ahead and implement these things when we enter into the land of Israel. This is the 5th of the portions of Nechama, of consolation, which is in the Maftir. The Haftorah speaks about the continual battle between Amalek, a nation called Amalek, and the Jewish people. Amalek was the first of the nations that attacked the Jewish people after they left Egypt, and after the world knew about all the miracles that God had created for the Jewish people to take them out of Egyptian bondage. And therefore, they said, we don't care. We'll fight them anyway. In a sense, they were saying, we're going to fight God. Even though we might get burnt in the process, they didn't care. And that is, therefore, a concept and a message to all of us to remember, that we will run into the situations of apathy and sarcasm by the nations of the world or our surrounding peers or friends will say, oh, you're becoming religious, so what is with you? You're So the Shavit, you should know that you should not be embarrassed or brought to a situation of feeling that you can't, it's not for me, I don't want to do it. You have to be bold as a leopard and strong as a lion to fulfill the will of our God in heaven. The Torah speaks about that children should not die for the sins of their fathers, and fathers should not die for the sins of their children. But you are punished for your own sins. This whole concept of responsibility applies to all humans. And then you should remember that even though you may have a stranger amongst you, you should treat him or her fairly. And you should never twist or corrupt judgment of the stranger, the ger, the orphan, or the widow, because you were once servants, slaves in the land of Egypt. And God took you out of it and commanded you to be fair and honest. This whole concept of creating a just world or fixing the world that needs fixing because of the various shortcomings that we have in it today is part and parcel of what occurs in the month of Elul and in the month of Tishrei, the 7th month that follows the 6th month of Elul. This whole idea of the world's purpose and being a stage for God's presence to become revealed in the lower world, in the physical world, where God's presence is hidden, is the job of the Jewish people and all of humanity. It is the job of creating a fixed world. Goes into a concept of setting up a judicial system, honest weights. You shouldn't have two types of weights, weighing something and then having one similar that is different. You will not have anything if in your pocket, large or small, a version of the same weight, it looks the same, but it is maybe made with a little bit of, how would I call it, foam inside, so it's not as heavy. Or something that is heavier, and therefore cheat the person. Not allowed to do that. To have honest weights. You will however have abundance if you have complete and accurate stone weights. God will provide you with the rewards. So this whole concept of the judicial system is a way of remembering that God provides for us if we are honest. And then it concludes with the words of, remember what Amalek did to you. He attacked you the weak. He didn't attack you up front, but he attacked you from behind. That's usually the way cowards attack. They attack you from behind. And therefore remember, there is no peace between you and Amalek. This whole concept of allowing the weak to be attacked and harmed, and being attacked in order to attack God, because the Jewish people are the representatives of God. All of humanity has drawn in one form or another their religious observances from the Jewish religion. So when you go out to do battle, you have to remember all this. The portion of Isaiah that is the Haftorah, and the reason why we have the Haftorah is because there were periods in Jewish history when the Jewish people were not allowed to teach or read or learn the Torah, and therefore they forbade it on the pain of death. But they would allow you to read your history, so to say. History is okay. Religion, no, we don't want you. The Greeks, the Romans, etc. The atheists of the latter day, communists, etc. No, but the history, history. So the Haftorah is basically composed of the prophets, of the history of the Jewish people entering into the land, establishing judicial courts, shoftim, etc. All this, and gives us an understanding that we are to remember something that is akin or similar to what we would have been reading in the Torah. So Parsha Seitzei, which we read yesterday, Saturday, is always read during the month of Elul, the final month of the Jewish year, on the level of the creation of the world. When we renew our relationship with God in preparation for a new year, because that's when humanity was created, that will begin on Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. And it's not called Shana Chadashah, the new year. It's called the head of the year. Because as it goes with the head, so goes the rest of the year. So goes the rest of the body. The Hebrew spelling of the word Elul is the initials of the phrase from the Song of Songs of King Solomon, Shir HaShirim. I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine. Ani ledodi v'dodi li. In this phrase, we express the preparation for the renewal and the relationship between God and ourselves. First, I make the effort to become my beloved, Ani ledodi. Since it precedes God's response, which comes, my beloved makes himself mine, is when God sees that we sincerely request of him to be close to him. Nonetheless, the fact that both processes are alluded to within the same single word indicates that our preparatory efforts should be on our level, on our physical level, and be imbued with a promise that the ultimate consummation of the marriage, so to say, between God, the Jewish people, and the world, and all of humanity, is a concept of an annual reenactment of that relationship. It was the second of the tablets of the Ten Commandments that came down, were brought down after the first tablets were broken because of the sin of the golden calf, and it finally culminated with the 10th day, which was Yom Kippur, which is the concept of the 40 days that Moshe was up there on Mount Sinai. And it ultimately will usher in the cosmic consummation of the final redemption. All of these themes are referred to in the Haftarah that we read. And it starts out with the words that Isaiah says, Rani Akara, Loi Yolada. God told Isaiah to tell the city of Jerusalem how he will address it when the Jewish people are redeemed from their final exile. Nowadays, currently in the 21st century, the Jewish people in all of the world is still in a pretty deep exile with all of the commotion and war and killings going on, unfortunately. And that time will ultimately come that there will be an end to all this. And therefore sing, Jerusalem, which is still barren, you who feel as though you have never given birth, break into a song of praise and be jubilant. You who feel as though you have never been in labor, to have the fruit of the womb and the child. For I assure you that the children of the abandoned wife, the Jewish people in exile, the Jewish people in the persecutions of communism, of the Inquisition, of all of the persecutions, I promise you, you will always remain my people. And I will always remain your God. And you will see that that is the way it shall be throughout history. You will be more numerous than the children of the married wife, which is, so to say, Edom, the nations of the world that are more than the Jews. You will be more than them. So says God. But this is the fifth of the prophecies of consolation. There are 7 which culminate with Rosh Hashanah. And even though the mountains move and the hills falter and will melt away, even if the merit of the patriarchs and the matriarchs is sort of exhausted, my kindness will not depart from you, nor will my covenant of peace ever falter to you, my people. So says God, who has compassion on you. So all of this is prophesied in Isaiah. We see it by virtue of the fact that this is real, by virtue of the fact that the Jewish people are still around. I returned to the land of Israel. I started the rebuilding of the land of Israel. No nation has ever done that. Thousands of years have gone by. Great empires have come and gone, but the Jew is still here. So may we merit to see this happen speedily in our days, and may it happen peacefully. In one of the letters that the Alter Rebbe writes about how it is and what we should be doing and be involved in the month of Elul, is the concept of tzedakah. The word tzedakah means righteousness. The act of tzedakah will be peace, and the reward for the service of tzedakah will be a quietness and sureness that will last forever. Shalom. It will be whole. The word shalom, whole, also means peace. Same word. When something is whole, it's not deficient. It will bring peace and quietness forever. So what is the difference between the words ma'aseh, actions, and avodah, which is service, and between shalom, which means peace, and hashket v'vetach, and silence or sureness and quietness? What is the difference? He says it will be understood by way of what our sages of blessed memory said on the verse, he makes peace in his high places. Michal, the angel Michal, is the prince of water. And Gabriel is the prince of fire. Yet they do not extinguish one another. Normally when you put together fire and water, it'll be extinguished. But they don't. Up in the heavenly spheres, the water seeks to quench fire, and fire endeavors to vaporize water, right? Throw water on a fire and go shh, and it'll vaporize. And Michal is the prince of water, and Gabriel is the prince of fire. Nevertheless, they do not extinguish one another. What does this mean? It says that Michal's substance derives from the spiritual element of water. Water is a concept of spirituality, and it has the ability to go from a high place to the lowest of places. That is the nature of water. And Gabriel's substance derives from the spiritual element of fire. And what does it do? It consumes the physical and makes it rise up. Fire rises up. But that, Michal is the prince of Chesed. Then you have the combination, which is the angel Michael, who is kindness. He is the Tsar, the prince of kindness, which is called water because it descends from a high place to a low place, and therefore it continues to go down. In spiritual terms, the descent means the bestowal and diffusion of the divine life force from the higher to the lower worlds, and revealing in the lower worlds the spiritual component that keeps them in existence. Fire, whose nature is to soar aloft, represents spiritually the thrust of Gvura, which is severity. Disconnect, wants to go away. And the upward withdrawal of the flow of the life force from the physical component, in order not to bestow it except by way of an intense and immense contraction. What happens when the fire? It consumes the corporal. Now these attributes are in conflict Chesed representing unlimited effusion and giving, and Gevurah representing limitation and contraction, restrictions. But only when they are in their pristine state as separate attributes, inasmuch as the attributes are inherently limited. And indeed, the very word midah, the Hebrew word midah, means a measure. That means that it is sort of restricted to this amount or volume. Each of them is confined to its innate characteristics. Chesed is the concept of expansiveness, giving. And Gevurah is the concept of withdrawal or restriction. So what did God want of all this when He created it? But the Holy One, blessed be He, makes peace between them, so that they should not oppose one another, but should support each other and help each other through a relation that God gives into the physical creation, so that an immense illumination and intense effusion from the infinite meaning the Ein Sof, that is without end, light, is revealed within them. And when it's revealed within them, then it makes them see that they both are part and parcel of the one Ein Sof, the one light without end, and therefore they unite. They work together, and they do not oppose each other through this revelation. For like His name, the name of Ein Sof, the infinite one, so is He. When something is infinite, you don't have beginnings and ends to it. It's infinite. He is not, heaven forfend or forbid, the measured plane of an attribute, but transcends exceedingly ad infinitum the whole corporal and physical world. Even the rank of the intellectual faculties of Chachma, Bina, and Das, known as the word Chabad, which is the higher faculties of the created being, person, which is the source of the attributes, all the other 7 attributes, characteristic traits that come forward. And surely He transcends the attributes themselves. God is without beginning and without end, and therefore is infinite. Then when God's infinite light is revealed within the attributes, the opposing attributes of Michael and Gabriel, Chesed and Gevurah, are absorbed in their source and root, and they become one. And that's what it means that He makes peace between them. And they become truly unified and are nullified in this light which radiates to them in a manifest way. And once their individuality, their 2 different characteristic traits, are nullified within the Ein Sof, then they cease to oppose each other. By way of an analogy, we could give an example, for instance, the intense enmity of 2 high officials. One has this idea and the other one has this idea. It dissolves in the presence of their sovereign into friendship, united, because they see the communal purpose of the whole rather than their individual attributes. It is the cause of their joint nullification before the king that this unity comes about. So too, the defined bounds of the various attributes dissipate and lose their opposing forces in the face of the limitless revelation of the infinite light that comes from God, the creator of all. So this whole concept of Gevurah is tempered and mellowed, so to say, sweetened by what? In the Chesed, the kindness, and is therefore transformed into good and kindness. What is it? Chesed is always giving. Gevurah is always restricted. Where can you combine the 2 and see it actually applicable or applied? It's in mercy, in the concept of Tiferet or mercy. When you have a mediary, the determining factor between Chesed and Gvura, which leans towards Chesed, this is the midah, the measure of Rachamim, the attribute of Rachamim, which is mercy. What does that mean? Mercy represents the idea that the person is standing in judgment. He or she has to be judged. They did something wrong, broke the law, whatever. So the judge sits and listens, and the prosecuting angels prosecute, and the defending angel defend, and therefore the judge listens and hears both sides, and he says, I will present the measure of mercy. So instead of the person getting 10 years, I will give him house arrest, or her. And that is the concept of mercy, of kindness, that is imbued. And this attribute of mercy is called Tiferet, beauty. Why is it beauty? When many colors are brought together, there is a beauty, a harmony that they express in a unified form. The terminology of the Kabbalah is that it presents the message of truth, because it is made up of the two colors, white and red. Here we see the whole concept of what we see, that on the days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we have a tradition that we wear white, which is the mercy, the attribute of kindness. Then there is the concept where the opposite, we do not wear red. Red is the concept of judgment. And in a sense, we are indicating that we do not want the concept of Gvura, of judgment. So Rachamim is therefore called Tiferet because there is a beauty in the harmony of diverse colors. When a great artist is able to combine all of the colors, then it expresses a concept of unity, of harmony, of wholeness, of peace. And therefore, the Zohar says, as it is written in the Zohar, each of the divine names indicates one of the attributes that God has. Kale, for example, indicates kindness, chesed. Elokim indicates gevura, judgment. And any unqualified appearance of the ultimate divine name, Havaya, which is known as Shem HaEtzem, the essence name, the essential name, alludes to the attribute of Tiferet, which is mercy. And why is this the case? For here in Tiferet, the infinite Ein Sof becomes manifest in an immense illumination and brings out the unifying force in the two opposing attributes of kindness and judgment. And that surpasses that of the other divine attributes. It unites them. This then is the meaning of the above quotation. He makes peace in the high places. The revelation of God's infinite light makes peace between Michael and Gabriel, who represent Chesed and Gvura. And that is also the neshama, the soul, together with the whole concept of the body, that are both. The body is a restrictive form of a vessel. And the soul is a concept of giving, of expansion, that we need to unite the two. Okay? Any questions?
So how can we bring wholeness into physical world?
Well, you got to engage both sides. The way how you engage both sides is you do the physical mitzvahs, which are for the body. You got to be able to put your hook in the body physically. You can't just think it. And then there's the concept of the soul of doing holy things, spiritual things. And when you unite the two, you are creating a fusion between the physical and the spiritual.
So how can you unite two? Mitzvah, doing mitzvah, and what else?
By doing the mitzvah, studying the Torah, living the lifestyle. If you leave the lifestyle, then you become part of that lifestyle. And you, in a sense, are nourishing the body by eating the Shabbos meals and Kiddush, physical, and then going to shul and davening, the spiritual. You bring the two together. The famous third Rebbe of Lubavitch, Tzemach Tzedek, listed 3 things by whose virtue he was successful in the rabbinical convention that occurred in 1843. One of these was the merit of the 32,000 hours that he labored over the Alter Rebbe's discourses over the span of the 30 years from 5564, 1804. He designated a special period to study the discourses of the Alter Rebbe, which we just studied. And in 1834, work was begun on their publication. So each one of us has to infuse the 2 elements, the spiritual with physical and the physical with spiritual. The spiritual with physical and the physical with spiritual. You do that by doing the physical mitzvot.
That's why in your love relationships, the physical and spiritual is very important. I just came from Sunny Isles, and this Russian woman fell in love with me very quickly, but then she fell out of love very quickly, and that's why I ran away to Tampa. And I didn't take the plane, I drove.
Okay, so one of the sentences that is brought down in the portion that we read this past Saturdays, that you should know, Ki avayil kecha nizhalech bekerev machanecha. Moshe tells the Jewish people, you should know you're not alone. Your army must conduct itself properly, for God your God accompanies you in the midst of your camp to rescue you and deliver your enemies before you. You're not going alone. The merit of those who actively protect our holy land and our people is very great. For they are assisting God, so to say, in his job of protecting us from our enemies. It is crucial that these individuals, the soldiers of Israel, cultivate faith and trust in Hashem, who is the true leader of legions, in order that they not fear the enemy or become disoriented. It is therefore particularly important that these individuals perform the commandment of putting on the tefillin. The soldiers of Israel, if I remember correctly, when they had to, in the Yom Kippur War, after things were not going well, cross and take the Suez, when they were attacked on Yom Kippur, General Sharon requested that the lead tanks be populated by soldiers who put on film. Why is that? Because film are worn opposite the heart and over the head, indicating that they aid in subjecting the emotions and the mind, that is the battle within us, to God. Subjecting our hearts and our minds to God ensures that we will respond correctly, both emotionally and intellectually, to the challenges we face in our own struggles with our physical self, with courage and confidence and clarity. This in turn will elicit God's blessings in whatever we do and in our ability to make the proper decisions to overcome our enemies. In the specific case of the military, this translates into victory in battle. But for all of us, it means success in our divine mission to make the world into God's ultimate home. Visibly so. A harmonious world. And that, I would like to conclude with, a reasonable world according to the Torah. Not according to the physical bodies of those that are distant from Torah and mitzvot. That is a very unreasonable position to try and take for a people that are God's emissaries. Therefore, you should remember that you have God within your machaneh, within your encampment, and He will go forward before you. Well, we can conclude with the words Eksiva v'chasimet tova, which means in the month of Elul, in the month of Tishrei, that we should be written, inscribed, and sealed for a happy and a healthy New Year. Bringing it down a little bit from the spiritual, intellectual level to the physical, corporal level, we do this by keeping the Shabbos. The Shabbat is the time of rest, and therefore we must always allow ourselves to be exposed to the spiritual component of Shabbat through the physical mitzvot and the physical foods and dishes and kiddush that we go ahead and do on that seventh day starting Friday night. A person should always remember that it is incumbent upon us to rest on Shabbat. That doesn't mean going to the beach and resting, but resting in a physical manner from the physical works of the mundane 6 days of the week, and focusing on why we make the Kiddush, because God created the heavens and the earth on that sixth day and the 6 days of creation. And we emulate that and harness that time frame of the 24 hours of Shabbat to a spiritual component of study, of learning, of resting, shutting off the cell phones. A happy and a healthy New Year to all. Services will be at our synagogue at 7:30 p.m. on Friday evening of Rosh Hashanah, and 10 o'clock in the morning, and on the second day also at 7:30 p.m. Saturday night, and 10 a.m. Sunday morning, with the blowing of the shofar at around 12:30 noontime. Shalom.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you so much.